Discover the shocking truth behind 5 hidden practices that transformed Caligula's rule forever. Sarah was a ghost in the quiet suburb of Willow Creek. Her historical dreams suffocated beneath the weight of expectations, each lesson she crafted swallowed by the louder voices of her colleagues in the staff room. She had always wanted to ignite passion in her students, but her voice felt muted within the confines of tradition. Her family, generations of educators, placed a heavy burden on her shoulders, seeking comfort in the predictable paths they had carved. One dull afternoon shifted her reality. In her late grandfather's attic, amid dust and memories, she found a leather-bound tome that beckoned like a siren. As she flipped through the faded notes, stories of power, betrayal, and the stark madness of Caligula enveloped her mind. These 5 practices she uncovered echoed in a haunting way to her own life's choices. A spark ignited within her. This was the substance she needed to challenge the humdrum lessons that defined her career, yet, the thrill of discovery clashed with the tumultuous voices in her mind. Did she have the right to challenge the family's legacy? A gnawing doubt settled in her chest as she plotted her lesson plans, the whispers of conformity tightening around her like a noose. Her thoughts spiraled. What if her family found out? What if they turned against her? Her heart raced, the soul-crushing pressure of expectation clawing at her resolve. Each morning at school, Sarah felt Derek's sharp gaze, his ambition tinging her enthusiasm with unease. He thrived on the status quo. Would he see her as a threat? As she delved deeper into her preparations, anticipation twisted into a whirlwind of anxiety. Just as she'd begun to feel alive, the prospect of vulnerability loomed over her, heavier than before. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The unveiling of her discoveries revealed more than just ancient practices, they flung open doors to a hidden scandal within her family's past. Faded letters hinted at betrayals that could shatter her perception of the lineage she was tethered to. What if these revelations led her to question not only what kind of teacher she wanted to be but also what kind of person her family truly was? With the media's eyes narrowing in on her newfound perspective, the tension mounted. Derek seized the opportunity to pit the administration against her, undermining her credibility by exploiting her fears, the storage of her lineage leaving her frayed, estranged. In a pivotal moment, he challenged her findings in front of the faculty, seeking to obliterate her resolve. Sarah stood rooted, adrift between the expectations that bound her and the raw truth clawing for release from within her. Would she allow Derek's criticisms to drag her back into compliance? Or would she confront the shadows of history, both Caligula's and her own, with the fortitude her family had never had the courage to embrace? As her pulse quickened, she faced the agonizing realization that the fight for truth was not merely academic, it was intimate and deeply personal. She needed to seize this moment, but fear seeped into the fibers of her being. Would Sarah rise from the suffocating depths of conformity, or would she succumb to the haunting specters of legacy once more? An icy grip of determination settled over Sarah as she faced her colleagues that next morning. Despite the trepidation swirling within her, she prepared her desk with intent, organizing her notes for the day's lesson. Each minute detail felt monumental, charged with the weight of her intentions. The act of arranging her materials became a ritual, a form of resistance against the inertia of tradition. As she unpacked the leather tome that had sparked her revelations, memories of her grandfather flooded her mind. He had dared to wander beyond the rigid confines of their family legacy, sharing tales of history that disrupted the perceptions of many. She felt his spirit urging her forward, reminding her of the lessons he lived by: challenge the voice of history, question authority, and embrace the chaos of truth. But uncertainty still lingered, gnawing at her psyche. Could she stand firm in her convictions when confronted with Derek's relentless scrutiny? Each encounter with him felt like a chess match, where the stakes were high and the pressure intense. Sarah envisioned their next confrontation playing out in her mind, a silent, desolate chessboard where one wrong move could cost her everything. As the students filtered in, she sensed the electric undercurrent of curiosity in the air. Today, she would introduce lessons drawn from the controversial practices of Caligula, embracing the very impulses that had been deemed too radical for her classroom. She inhaled deeply, gathering courage, and began. Today, we will explore power, the kind that corrupts and the kind that inspires, she intoned, her voice steady. The room hushed, eyes wide with intrigue. Sarah pressed on, layering her historical analysis with modern parallels, drawing on the human psyche's fascination with power dynamics. As she delved into the topic, she noticed how her students leaned in, engaged and animated by what they were hearing. Why do we ignore the darker aspects of history? She asked, looking directly at her students. What makes us uncomfortable about discussing figures like Caligula? Is it the truth we fear? The questions rippled through the room. For the first time, Sarah felt herself step into the role she had yearned for, a provocateur igniting dialogue, not just a vessel for stale facts. As hands shot up amidst the murmurs, even Derek's shadow loomed less intimidating. Instead of cutting her off, he remained silent, his curiosity piqued against his will. As the bell rang, signaling the end of class, Sarah noticed a shift. A bond had formed between her and her students, igniting a sense of agency she had only dreamed of previously. In that chaotic moment of laughter and debate, hope burgeoned within her. Perhaps she could alter the narrative, not just for herself but for those eager to learn. With renewed confidence, she resolved not to shy away from the complexity that embodied her family's legacy. Instead, she planned to confront it, leveraging the truths that history had buried. As she gathered her belongings, energy coursed through her, and she wondered if perhaps today marked a turning point, an inflection point in her own journey of self-discovery. Yet, the looming threat of Derek persisted. Would he retaliate after watching her triumphant class? And what consequences might arise for challenging the familial legacy? Questions hung in the air, pregnant with possibilities. The deeper she ventured into her unraveling history, the clearer it became. Her fight for authenticity was only just beginning. The fragile thread connecting her to her family's past trembled beneath the weight of her ambitions. But had she forged a path forward or awakened a slumbering giant? Only time would tell, and the clock was ticking toward their inevitable confrontation. The following day felt like a long, strange echo of the last. As Sarah moved through the classroom, organizing papers and preparing for her next lesson, her senses were heightened, alert to every small shift in her environment. A palpable tension hung in the air, a silent acknowledgement of her newfound resolve. The students bowed to their intellectual engagement, and she basked in its glow while simultaneously wrestling with the shadows of confrontation that loomed ahead. Still, whispers of doubt questioned her last class's authority. Had Derek been stewing silently, plotting his next move? The anticipated backlash gnawed at her, lurking in the corners of her mind as she poised herself for another deep dive into history's murky waters. Caligula had been a tyrant, a figure of ridicule, yet she had unearthed truths that suggested a complexity often drowned in oversimplified narratives. This complexity beckoned her forward, pushing her to unearth more, even if it meant confronting the obvious fallout. Underneath her confidence was an urge to prove herself, to solidify her stance against Derek's skepticism and the ghosts of her family legacy. But first, she needed to find the courage to outwardly confront her fears. When students filed in for the day's lesson, she was resolute. Today, we continue our exploration, not just of power but of the narrative's history constructs, she announced, her voice firm. She watched their faces light up with curiosity, their interest palpably igniting the space between them. Let us ask ourselves, how do we define success in the realms of power? To whom do we assign blame when authority is misused? Hands shot up again, and Sarah could feel the pulse of the discussion thrumming in the air. Unlike the last class, she instinctively reached out, pushing students to connect the historical fabric of Caligula's reign with contemporary power struggles. The connection was resonating deeply, her students fired back with fierce insights, engaging with vigor that made her heart race. This was not merely a lesson, it felt like a short revolution, yet, lurking in the back of her mind was Derek's stoic presence. He entered the equation without fanfare, taking a seat where her gaze could not avoid. His silence was a paradox, an unsettled energy surging just beneath the surface. Would he join this conversation, disrupt it, or remain a shadow? As the bell rang for the end of class, her heart thudded with a different rhythm and anticipation fueled by both fear and excitement. As she collected her materials, Derek approached, his expression unreadable. "Interesting perspective, Sarah," he began, but she steeled herself against the critique she feared was to follow. "But you know as well as I do that romanticizing Caligula can lead to serious misunderstandings of our historical narratives." His steady tone was unsettling, the mildness of his voice belying the intensity of the message. "I'm not romanticizing anything," she retorted, some of her newfound passion bubbling over her reservations. "I'm exploring the complexity of history. Ignoring these aspects is trivializing the past." In that moment, a heat rose in her cheeks, part determination, part fear. She had invoked her lineage's spirit, yet here was its representative standing right in front of her, a direct challenge to her burgeoning authority. Instinct challenged logic as she weighed her options. Could she navigate this confrontation without succumbing to the patterns of dismissal they both knew too well? With her students milling around, Sarah realized that this was her moment not only to defend her ideas but to assert her identity. In this milieu that reframed the rules, it was she who must take the next step. "I'd like us to debate this more deeply, Derek," she declared, her voice resolute. "In fact, I think a classroom debate could illuminate the narratives better than a simple lecture ever could. What do you say?" His eyes glinted with surprise, and as the challenge settled between them, she felt a shift within herself. But would Derek accept her invitation or continue to undermine her? This wasn't just about the classroom anymore, it was a fight for her voice against a legacy that loomed large. She sensed that the inflection point she had yearned for had crystallized. The stakes were rising, and the path ahead appeared both treacherous and exhilarating. The moment of reckoning was at hand, yet she could only hope it wouldn't spiral into chaos. With the stakes higher than ever, she understood that the next class would be critical not just for her growth, but for her very own narrative. In the hours leading up to the next class, Sarah felt an electric mixture of anxiety and anticipation coursing through her. The idea of a debate hung over her like a storm cloud, heavy yet charged with potential energy. Every passing minute only amplified the internal dialogue swirling within her mind. She visualized each possible outcome: Derek dismissing her, students championing her ideas, and various shades of conflict converging in an unpredictable frenzy. As she prepped her materials, she relayed her thoughts to herself almost like a mantra. This is not just about winning an argument, it's about understanding history and allowing her students to engage with it in a way they never had before. The purpose wasn't solely to prove Derek wrong but to invite exploration, a concept that had always been buried under rigid authority figures. Still, doubt lingered like a persistent whisper. What if they sided with him? What if she struggled to maintain the flow of ideas amid the turmoil? Each situation played out in her mind, and the weight of those uncertainties felt as heavy as the textbook she carried. When the bell rang and students filtered into the room, Sarah stood at the front, visibly taking a deep breath to center herself. Their faces expressed excitement, but could they sense the apprehension underlying her composure? She had to channel their enthusiasm, to ensure that energy turned into a collaborative exploration instead of a battleground. "Welcome back, everyone. Today," she started, projecting confidence as best as she could muster, "we are going to dig deep into a debate on Caligula's rule, its complexities and its implications on power dynamics, both then and now." A murmur spread through the class, interest peaked once more about the controversial figure. Sarah's gaze landed on Derek, whose presence seemed almost magnetic, drawing attention and amplifying the stakes. Their eyes locked, and she saw a flicker of challenge reflected back. He neither agreed nor disagreed outwardly, but she could feel that beneath his calm surface, a tempest was brewing. "To frame our discussion," she continued, "I want to divide you into two groups. One will explore the idea that Caligula was a misunderstood leader, while the other will argue against that notion, claiming he primarily epitomized tyranny." Hands shot up in anticipation, with students eager to take sides. Sarah reveled in the energy of the room as she assigned groups, absorbing the growing sense of purpose. For the first time, she noticed how Derek leaned forward, eyes scanning the room less aloof, more engaged. As the groups began their preparations, Sarah navigated the room, engaging with her students and steering the conversations, allowing her passion to infiltrate every interaction. In that moment, she rediscovered her calling not merely to impart knowledge but to lead discussions, promote divergent perspectives, and foster a sense of critical thinking. She caught Derek's eye again, this time, a hint of respect passed between them. He proposed relevant questions to the students, pushing them further, making her acutely aware of the balancing act between encouraging independent thought while remaining resolute in her convictions. The debate commenced with palpable tension, words sparking revelations. As ideas collided and philosophies clashed, Sarah found herself moving fluidly between guiding the conversation and stepping back to let her students engage fully. She listened intently as they echoed the themes she had presented, occasionally weaving in her own insights to challenge misconceptions, yet, amid the fervor, Sarah felt a constant nagging sensation. It was one thing to stir the pot, but another to hold the reins of an intensifying discourse. As the discussion crescendoed, she took note of Derek's arguments. He was articulating counterpoints with precision, encouraging students against romanticized views just as they debated. Just as she felt she was gaining ground, he offered arguments that made her question her position, poking at the seams of her reasoning. It dawned on her that winning wasn't the goal, it was about developing a dynamic understanding of history and power's nature, revealing her strengths and vulnerabilities. The experience felt transformative not just for her students but for her as well. As she wrapped up the class, she faced Derek once more. He nodded approvingly, a silent acknowledgement of the efforts they both poured into the discussion. But was this approval merely surface level? Or was there a deeper, impending challenge lurking behind his expression? Great engagement today, Sarah, he said, a subtle shift in his tone. But let us see how deep those narratives run next time. Sarah's heart raced. A new wave of determination washed over her. She was ready for more confrontations, but what specialized knowledge might Derek reveal in their next class? The stakes kept rising, and it was clear the journey of contested narratives was just beginning. The days that followed the debate lingered in Sarah's mind, each moment layered with a pressure she hadn't anticipated. Her desire to explore deeper historical narratives clashed with her growing realization of Derek's influence over her. He had become more than just a colleague, he was a mirror reflecting her insecurities and ambitions, challenging her to confront aspects of herself she kept dormant. As she prepared for their next class, a note slid across her desk caught her attention. It was a simple phrase written boldly, "Are you ready to uncover the truth?" The handwriting felt familiar. Derek's. He had a knack for piquing her curiosity, but this felt different. A challenge? An invitation? In the hours leading up to class, she studied the last lesson's notes, combing through ideas, analogies, and historical references that felt rich with potential. Each page resonated with unanswered questions about power, corruption, and the dark tendencies hidden in every ruler's backdrop. Behind her determination lay a flicker of apprehension. What truths or unexpected turns might she face? When she entered the classroom, the students buzzed with excitement, a palpable energy igniting the air. Sarah welcomed them not just to share knowledge but to unearth it together. Today's topic was contentious yet ripe with possibilities, the hidden practices that had solidified Caligula's power, a mix of intrigue, manipulation, and even unexpected alliances. This was more than just a lesson, it was a collaborative excavation into the architecture of tyranny. As she launched into the day's topic, her voice steadied and grew fervent. Today, we'll talk about the covert practices that enabled Caligula to cling to power, practices that echo in our political structures today. Let us not just dissect the past, let's immerse ourselves in it. Derek made his entrance, and with his sharp suit and even sharper gaze, he commanded attention. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, an enigmatic smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. As much as she hated admitting it, he brought a sense of intensity to the room, an intensity she yearned to understand but wasn't sure she could ever master. Interacting with the students, Sarah encouraged them to dissect primary sources, urging them to think critically about what was omitted, why it mattered, and how narratives were carefully sculpted. The energy surged as students began proposing theories about power dynamics and their relevance, while Derek interjected with calculated questions that propelled their discussions deeper. Why does framing matter? He challenged a student. Could it be that history as we know it often betrays the complexities of human motivations? This struck a chord within Sarah. Here was Derek, not just countering her but complementing the exploration. His presence added gravity to the discourse, heightening the stakes and testing her resolve. As the class delved into vigorous debate, Sarah felt a rising tide of exhilaration. She was no longer fighting the anxiety of uncertainty, she embraced it. Each student's contribution revealed new layers, and she found herself redirecting conversations, bending the dialogue into richer paths of inquiry. But just when she thought the class was successfully immersed in the origin of tyrannies, Derek posed another unexpected question that landed like a stone. What makes a ruler like Caligula vile in retrospect but a necessary evil at the time? How do we reconcile that duality in our evaluations? The classroom fell silent, every eye shifting between her and Derek. It felt like a gauntlet had been thrown down. Not only was he scrutinizing her knowledge, but he was also compelling her to rethink her entire approach to how history and morality intertwined. In that moment, her determination solidified further. She wouldn't retreat against his scrutiny, she'd transform it into a drive for further exploration. Sarah needed to confront not just Derek in the classroom but her own understanding of the moral implications of leadership. As the bell rang, the students filed out, still buzzing with ideas. Sarah faced Derek, a spark ignited within her that made her feel alive. You're pushing me to reevaluate not just Caligula but all of history, she declared. Good, he replied, leaning closer, his expression oddly serious. But let us see if you're willing to face the uncomfortable truths about power. The next lesson will challenge everything you've built so far. Her pulse quickened. What lay behind that challenge? Was she ready to peel back the layers of her convictions? The stakes were higher than ever, and Sarah felt the thrill of embarking upon this escalating journey of self-discovery. The narrative of Caligula was only the beginning, she could almost see the path unfolding before her. What revelations awaited her as she delved deeper into this historical labyrinth? As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting deep shadows across her desk, Sarah felt the pull of Derek's challenge linger in the air long after the classroom had emptied. She struggled to focus on her evening preparations, but thoughts of those hidden truths gnawed at her like an itch that demanded to be scratched. What power dynamics had she overlooked in her interpretations of history? What if, in her quest for illumination, she was merely skimming the surface of a much darker water? The next morning, determined and anxious, Sarah revisited Caligula's regime. She sifted through dusty tomes, combing pages as if they were a treasure map leading to forgotten nuggets of historical significance. She immersed herself in details, intrigues of palace coups, the whispers of betrayal among advisors, the eerie machinations behind the scenes. Each revelation felt like a piece connecting to a larger puzzle she was eager to form, even as tendrils of doubt curled around her resolve. Do you truly have the willingness to challenge the status quo? Derek's voice echoed in her mind, pushing her to confront not just Caligula's legacy but the foundational principles upon which her own narratives were built. There was a strange exhilaration in this responsibility. It was terrifying yet invigorating. As she prepared her next lecture, she realized that this was not merely about Caligula's tactics but about the fundamental analyses that she held dear. What made her interpretations valid? How often had she shied away from the complex tapestry of morality that embellished every ruler's plight? The classroom transformed into a battleground of ideas when the bell summoned her students. This time, Sarah was relentless. Today we're going beyond the veil of history. We'll delve into power, how it's maintained, how it's challenged, and how morality is often a mere disguise for ambition. The students were captivated, some even leaning forward with anticipation. She finally felt the stirring of her own authority as a guide through this moral maze. Derek entered just as her introduction reached its apex, his expression a blend of admiration and probing curiosity that ignited her resolve further. Let us begin with something controversial, Sarah said, facing the class squarely. What if I told you that Caligula's madness was a strategic facade? What if the most tyrannical acts were veils for deeper psychological warfare against those who dared to oppose him? The discussion that followed was charged with energy. Students debated the authenticity of Caligula's insanity versus his wants for power and control over perceptions. Sarah felt herself thriving in the ebb and flow of conflicting ideas, her confidence building with each thoughtful contribution, but Derek was there, intentionally steering conversations. Sarah, wouldn't you say that labeling Caligula as mad risks reductively simplifying complex reasons behind his decisions? Could it be that perception, much like in your interpretation, plays a larger role than reality? His question rippled through the room, forcing her to confront those layers within her own narrative. Was she, like Caligula's contemporaries, creating a character that fit a convenient storyline? Those labels are indeed traps, she replied, colored with surprise at her own quickness. But mustn't we also catch the emotional weight behind them? Let us draw parallels. How does our society create labels that serve not just to understand but to control narratives? For the first time, she opened space for vulnerability and strategy, allowing herself to peel away layers burdened with formalities to get to the heart of what power did to human relationships. Students were pensive, eyes widened as the words fell heavy in the room. As the day progressed, Sarah discovered more about her strengths. She was building an inclusive and honest discourse, challenging both herself and her students to think critically. Yet, Derek's persistent questions still loomed in her mind like specters, compelling her to confront not just the historical narrative she examined but her own motivations. When class ended, Derek lingered behind, his presence sudden and electrifying. You navigated that well, but remember, the truths you aim to discover will also uncover uncomfortable parts of yourself. Have you truly prepared for that? She met his gaze, steeling herself against the apprehension crawling at her edges. I can't turn back now. I need to know what else is hidden beneath the surface within Caligula's rule and within myself. The weight of her resolve settled. But as Sarah left the classroom, a chilling realization gnawed at her. What further truths would she unearth about power, manipulation, and, ultimately, herself? How deep was she willing to plunge into this labyrinth of history that mirrored her own insecurities? As the door clicked shut behind her, anticipation and fear coiled tightly within her, leaving her teetering on the edge of revelation. Wrapped in a cocoon of indecision and rumination, Sarah stepped outside into the cool evening, her mind swirling with the implications of the day's discourse. With each stride away from the campus, the weight of Derek's question lingered heavier, entwining itself with her lingering fascination for Caligula. Could unearthing these historical truths reveal insights about her own ambitions, her leadership in the classroom, and perhaps a deeper understanding of her identity? That night, she sat on her couch, surrounded by notes and historical texts, the pages whispering secrets long buried. As silence settled in, her thoughts turned introspective. The grand narrative of Caligula was not merely a series of events, it was a reflection of human nature itself, a power struggle, rife with ambition, betrayal, and an unquenchable thirst for dominance. Was she not engaging in a similar quest? A desire to become an authority in her own realm, one that could challenge even those who may consider themselves her superiors. In a plunge of inspiration, she scribbled down ideas, a sort of manifesto outlining how to bring students not just along for the ride but into the fray of historical interpretation. They had begun to relish the debate, and Sarah realized the more she stepped into the uncertainty and complexity of the subjects, the more alive her classroom became. Her role was less about imparting knowledge and more about inviting her students to confront their own biases and assumptions. The next day, Sarah's preparation took on an urgency. Her outline shifted from a straightforward narrative of events to a series of case studies. Each segment would grapple with the morality and psychology behind the power plays of leaders like Caligula. By doing so, she could nurture critical thought, teaching students not only how to engage with history but how to apply those lessons to their lives. However, Derek's provocative questions loomed, begging her to reflect on her motivations as she shaped these discussions. What if her aim to elevate her teaching was simply a veneer to mask deeper insecurities? Could it be that her passion for history was intertwined with a personal pursuit for validation? With a deep breath, Sarah resolved to confront these issues head-on. In her research, she discovered obscure accounts reflections on leaders who once stood poised to create change but were ultimately trapped by their own ambitions. She recognized the duality present in these historical figures, embodying both saviors and tyrants. The complexity drew her in further, seducing her into a realm where narrative could shift depending on perspective. When lecture day arrived, Sarah felt a tangible thrill coursing through her. She approached the classroom with purpose, ready to challenge her students like never before. They would dissect not only Caligula's actions but the very motivations behind those actions. Who had labeled him mad, and for what reasons? What mechanisms had they employed to silence dissent? As she encouraged the students to frame Caligula's reign within the landscapes of ambition and fear, she found her footing solidifying. The blend of apprehension and excitement emboldened her presence. A realization struck: she was unearthing the character of Caligula while simultaneously sculpting her own. Today, we won't settle for simple answers, she declared, locking eyes with each student. Think about the power you hold as individuals, the choices you make. In what ways are those choices swayed by external perceptions or societal narratives? As discussions thrived, Sarah felt her confidence rising. She navigated the room, prompting deeper questions, encouraging students to peel back their own motivations with all the reluctance of a hesitant historian unearthing buried truths. Yet, amidst the electric buzz of learning, Derek remained an ever-watchful guardian of her thoughts. His presence bore a reminder of the duality present in every interaction, challenging her perceptions. After class, she felt exhilarated and drained. Thoughts of her own vulnerabilities filled the void left by the day's fervor. What chasms of truth awaited her exploration? And would she uncover something that could reshape not just how she saw history, but how she viewed herself within that saga? Clarity flickered in and out as self-doubt mingled with the thrill of discovery. As she left the classroom for the day, she caught sight of Derek leaning against the wall, arms crossed, a shadow, as always. "You pushed them further than before," he said, one eyebrow arched. "But remember, every journey inward brings challenges. Are you ready to confront what you'll find?" In that moment, she felt a knot of nervousness twist in her stomach, a prelude to answers she was reluctant to uncover. "Ready as I'll ever be," she said, her smirk betraying an edge of uncertainty. But as she stood there facing Derek, an unsettling question unfurled in her mind. What if the truths she sought to reveal about Caligula mirrored the most intimate truths of her own life? The implications were overwhelming, yet provocatively enticing. What shadows would she discover next? The next few days slipped by in a haze, a delicate dance between exhilarating revelations and the creeping shadows of doubt. Sarah dove deeper into her preparation, meticulously building next week's lessons around the complexities of Caligula's reign. Engaging her students was no longer a means to an end, it had morphed into a quest where she, too, sought answers, personal, elusive answers that lay buried under layers of ambition and fear. As she flipped through texts, the pages felt heavier each time. This was not merely about teaching historical facts or figures, it was an intricate exploration of human motivations. She remembered Derek's words, echoing reminders of introspection and the challenges residing therein. With every lesson plan, another question blossomed in her mind. Was she simply a teacher, or was this endeavor a call to assert herself against her own inner tyrants? One afternoon, she stood before her class again, a fresh wave of determination igniting her spirit. "Caligula represents a breach of trust," she began, her voice steady. "But who defines that trust? What does it mean to lead, and where does it falter?" Amidst the discussions, she sensed the palpable energy shifting. It was no longer a simple lecture but a living dialogue. She pressed the students to consider not just the historical implications but their own connections to the material. How do your choices wield power even in small ways? Can ambition lead to betrayal, even among friends? The room erupted in heated exchanges, mirrors reflecting pieces of themselves in the chaos of history. As the dialogue deepened, Sarah spotted Emma, a bright student with a penchant for debate, wrestling visibly with her thoughts. Sarah paused the conversation, directing attention to her. "What's on your mind?" she asked, a kind invitation masked with genuine curiosity. Emma glanced up, hesitation dancing in her expression. "I think I've been too afraid to assert my opinions. What if I'm wrong, like Caligula was?" The room drew a collective breath, their own insecurities laid bare. "Every leader has faced that fear," Sarah said, feeling the weight of her own words. "The possibility of being wrong has never stopped great minds. It shapes them. In a way, perhaps the mistakes become part of their legacy. What if you give voice to that fear instead of letting it control you?" With the class buzzing, Sarah felt a spark ignite within herself. She was weaving threads of history into her students' personal narratives, and in doing so, was uncovering her own connections to fragility and courage. Each moment of vulnerability, theirs and her own, began assembling into a resonance of authenticity. Weeks past lessons flowed, and in more frequent moments of reflection, she kept confronting her motivations. The magic of teaching transformed into a relentless mirror that forced her to face fears entwined with unfulfilled desires for recognition. With every success in her classroom, the haunting memories of self-doubt re-emerged, the chaotic power dynamic of being an authority figure oscillating dangerously close to the fears she held of inadequacy. One evening, as she finalized a lesson on the outcomes of power abused, Sarah's laptop screen glowed in the dim light, illuminating the dark room like a spotlight on her doubts. Was she pretending to be a powerful leader, a facade to mask her growing uncertainties? She clenched her jaw, grappling to reconcile her ambitions with the self-loathing that often swirled around them. In that moment, a message pinged on her screen. It was from Derek, short and pointed, ready to confront those shadows now. Her stomach turned. There was a challenge lying in wait, an invitation to delve deeper into her motives, an expectation to reconcile the dualities that both excited and terrified her. Determination battled with dread as her heart raced. "Yes, tonight," she typed back, steeling herself for what lay ahead. It was time to confront not just the complexities of Caligula, but her own unapologetic ambition as a leader, a journey that held the promise of reshaping everything she believed about herself. Little did she know that unearthing these truths would ripple through every aspect of her life, igniting revelations she had never anticipated. What awaited her on the cusp of that confrontation? The walls of certainty began to tremble, hinting that perhaps the answers she sought lay beyond what she dared to uncover. The sunlight dimmed as dusk settled outside, casting elongated shadows across Sarah's room. She leaned back in her chair, her breath shallow. The weight of Derek's challenge loomed larger than the lesson plans that had consumed her consciousness for weeks. With a shaky hand, she closed her laptop and let the uncertainty swirl around her like a tempest. The rustle of papers beckoned her back to reality. From the scattered notes, she fished out the pages dedicated to personal reflections, a series of prompts Derek had shared during their earlier conversations. Each question was designed to shove her toward discomfort, a push into the depths of self-exploration she had attempted to avoid. What did it mean to lead? When did ambition morph into tyranny? The mere thought of answering these questions filled her with a mix of curiosity and trepidation. A part of her wanted to escape, to retreat into the familiar. Yet, the flicker of ambition ignited the fire within her. She tidied the pages into a neat stack and grabbed her phone. Texting Derek felt like a shot into the unknown. "Okay, let's do this. Where do we start?" Her thumb hovered, then pressed send, setting the stage for what felt like a reckoning. Derek's response was immediate. "Meet me at the cafe in 30. Bring your reflections. It's time for your voice to be heard." A surge of adrenaline flooded through her veins. As she dressed, Sarah glanced at her reflection in the mirror. She looked composed, but inside, her heart thudded erratically. This wasn't just about gathering insights into history, it was a quest to unearth her truths, relentless and fearless. Arriving at the cafe minutes later, she spotted Derek sitting at a table tucked away in a corner. He appeared calm, sipping his coffee, scribbling notes. She took a deep breath before approaching, forcing her burgeoning doubts to the recesses of her mind. "Thank you for coming," he greeted, a slight smile creasing his face. Let us dive into those reflections. Unfolding the pages, Sarah laid bare her sentiments, her fears of inadequacy, the struggles of asserting her opinions, the suffocating doubt she felt each time she stood before her students. With every word, she felt the sobering weight of vulnerability mingling with the heady thrill of baring her soul. Why do you think it's hard for you to assert yourself? Derek probed gently, his gaze unwavering. I fear judgment. I worry that I'll falter like the leaders I teach about, Sarah admitted, her voice cracking. Derek leaned in, his expression shifting to one of intensity. But what if you reframed that fear? What if you saw these doubts not as obstacles but as opportunities to connect? The vulnerability you feel, many leaders experience it too. Recognizing it can actually empower you. Empower me? She echoed, digesting the implication. Could her reluctance actually be an entry point to greater understanding and authenticity? Yes. Owning your fears brings a level of clarity in leadership that is magnetic and relatable. Embrace those moments of uncertainty. They'll resonate with your students and help them confront their own fears. With each question Derek posed, Sarah began to untangle the knot of her doubts, feeling the rush of emerging self-awareness. Different images floated in her mind, her students, hesitant yet eager to share their thoughts, much like her own reluctance before speaking out. Do you realize, Derek continued thoughtfully, that by sharing your uncertainties, you humanize yourself? In doing so, you can transform a lesson about Caligula into a conversation about personal integrity and your journey to finding your voice. A realization settled like a seed deep within her. By confronting her fears openly, perhaps she could unlock not just her potential but also invite her students to do the same. It was a radical shift, no longer a facade of authority standing over them, but a fellow traveler navigating the terrain of ambition and vulnerability. As their conversation deepened, Sarah felt a subtle shift, a newfound conviction shaping her perspective. But as she flipped to the last page of her reflections, her heart tightened again, uncertainty creeping back. What if implementing this newfound clarity led her down a path she couldn't navigate? Derek seemed to read the hesitation in her eyes. This is just the beginning. To truly lead, you must be willing to take risks, just like Caligula did, albeit for different reasons. You have the tools, use them wisely. His words hung in the air, echoing the need for decisive action. What kind of leader would she become if she fully embraced her vulnerabilities? As Sarah walked out into the fading light, determination surged. She knew she was at the precipice of change, but could she embrace the risks ahead of her? How far was she willing to go to transform her classroom into a space of daring vulnerability? The faint sound of thunder rolled overhead, reminding her that storms often precede clarity. With each step, uncertainty lingered, but so did an invigorating sense of purpose. Tomorrow, she would challenge her students to embrace their own uncertainties, sparking a dialogue that could reshape not just her teaching, but her entire understanding of leadership. But as she suddenly felt herself grappling with the prospect of unveiling her authentic self in class, another question bubbled to the surface: would her students be ready to meet her at that level of honesty? The path ahead shimmered with promise, yet dark clouds of doubt gathered in the corners, waiting for the right moment to strike. The next morning dawned bright and clear, yet Sarah felt a storm brewing within her. She paced her living room, the sunlight streaming through the windows, illuminating the countless notes and reflections scattered around. She was poised to challenge her students to embrace their vulnerabilities, but her heart raced at the thought. Would they accept her as a flawed leader, or would they judge her as weak? Arriving at school, anticipation gripped her. As students began to filter into the classroom, she steadied her resolve. Today would not be just another lesson, it was an opportunity for transformation both for her and for them. She started with an open heart, keying into her own unease and presenting it as an authentic invitation. Welcome back, everyone. Her voice was softer yet carried a potent sincerity. Today, I want to talk about something that has been weighing on my mind: fear, doubts, and how we confront them, both in our lives and as we study history. The class buzzed with curiosity. As she outlined the discussion, she shared snippets from her reflections, her own fears of inadequacy and concerns about the authority she wielded. The students listened, a mix of surprise and empathy washing over them. What if we challenged ourselves to discuss not just the history of Caligula's reign but our own personal threshold for power and fear? She proposed, locking eyes with several students who nodded in agreement, hands shot up eagerly, voices erupted with thoughts, and for the first time, Sarah felt a palpable shift in the energy of the room. The barriers began to dissolve. Discussions were no longer about historical facts but their interpretations, the gray areas where morality intersected with ambition, the very essence of being human. Empowered, she nudged the conversation to delve deeper. When Caligula took bold actions, often termed tyrannical, was it merely a voice of madness, or was there a fear of dissent that we can relate to today? The debate sparked passions flared as students connected historical tyranny to their own lives, reflectively examining moments where fear had governed their decisions. Amidst the fervor, she caught Emma's eye again. Emma stood, her earlier hesitance replaced by fervor. "It's scary to speak up sometimes. But when you did today, it felt like you were inviting us to do the same," she said, her voice firm. The room buzzed with agreement. Sarah's heart swelled. They were getting it, they were beginning to realize the power of vulnerability. "Exactly, Emma," Sarah replied, her confidence surging. "Vulnerability isn't weakness, it's strength. It fosters connection and deeper understanding of one another." This moment was a fulcrum of growth for her, a testament to the evolution she had fought so hard to embrace. Derek, who had arrived at the tail end of the discussion, stood at the back, observing the scene unfold. Sarah didn't avoid his gaze this time. Instead, she welcomed it, fueled by the energy in the room. His approving nod sent shivers of affirmation through her. As the class drew to a close, Sarah felt a sense of fulfillment blossom within her. She had not only engaged her students but had inspired them to voice their truths. The transformation within her was palpable. Fear had shifted to empowerment, self-doubt replaced with a solid affirmation of her role. "Remember," she concluded, her voice steady and resolute, "our fears can either hold us back or propel us forward. Don't shy away from them. They are part of what makes us human, part of our shared narrative." The bell rang, signaling the end of class, but instead of filing out, several students lingered, eager to discuss their thoughts further. Emma approached Sarah, her excitement unmistakable. "I can't believe how much I related to you today. It made me realize I'm not alone in this." "Exactly," Sarah said, her heart racing. "You've got a voice, and it matters." Throughout the classroom, she saw budding connections and realized she had fostered an environment brimming with empathy and intrigue, an achievement she could hardly have fathomed weeks ago. Students filed out, she felt a sense of completion wash over her. The enormity of the day's lesson felt liberating. She had not only asserted her presence as an educator but had transformed into a bridge for her students to explore their vulnerabilities, echoing the very historical complexities of Caligula's reign. Later that afternoon, as she reflected on the day, Derek approached. "You handled that exceptionally well," he remarked, showing a rare moment of camaraderie. "You've embraced authenticity, and it's paying off." A rush of pride surged within her. "I'm learning that leadership isn't just about authority, it's about being real and creating space for others." Derek nodded, a hint of a smile breaking through. "Then you've made a powerful shift, Sarah. Keep pushing the boundaries, this could lead to something significant." And with that, a sense of exhilarating anticipation filled her. She was no longer just seeking recognition within the shadows of her ancestry, she had become a beacon of hope for her students, a leader willing to confront vulnerability head-on. As she drove home that evening, a smile spread across her face. She felt boundless. She understood now that true power lay in the willingness to explore the deeper elements of self and history, an achievement forged not in conformity, but in courageous authenticity. The journey was just beginning, and she was ready to navigate it fully. You need to subscribe now to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share this transformative journey.